Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. This one's gonna be a long one. I don't know, because I'm pre-recording this, how long it'll actually be. However, we have a lot to talk about. But to give you the overall summary of what we're going to be talking about, the Nintendo Switch 2 recently dropped. And no matter how I actually get the console, I'm a gooner. I had to get one no matter what. But if you do have a Nintendo Switch 2 or don't, you've been seeing a mixed reaction from a lot of people. Some people are completely happy because it could be their first Switch ever. Others can be pissed off because there's a limited amount of stuff added to the Switch 2 compared to the Switch 1. And then some people just don't really care at all. I mean, that's perfectly fine too. But regardless, if you love or hate the Nintendo Switch 2, there's a lot to talk about. I'm talking about the console itself, I'm talking about the games related to the console, and even Nintendo themselves. So let me start off this video by asking you a simple question. Are you happy that Nintendo released the Switch 2? I'm gonna let you think about it, and then as we get into this video, I'm gonna go ahead and give you my opinion as well as others that I've been seeing around the globe. And of course, keep this civil, but I want to hear what you think about the Switch 2 and Nintendo in the comments down below. Now, let me just start off by saying this. I, of course, have a Nintendo Switch 2. I have it just like you do, a black console with no originality and no OLED built in. I have the accessories built into it as well, such as the camera, including other crap that they have as well. And also, that means that if I have the Switch 2, I either had to pay the $450 US for it, or the $500 with Mario Kart included. Now look, even if you did get the console and didn't have to pay for it, let's just assume that you and I did. To compare this, the Nintendo OLED version was about $100 cheaper with no game included. And if you don't know, a OLED screen is simply just better than other screens, but they chose not to give this to you within the Switch 2. Instead, you're going to get the regular LCD screen. I'm not going to say that the screen is necessarily bad. However, when you do have a OLED screen that is much better, why would you go back to LCD? But look, the console itself does bring more to it than I originally thought. I mean, the Joy-Cons from what I've seen and at least felt myself seem heftier as well as more stable. There's probably still going to be drift. I'm sure I can find an instance somewhere. But the Switch Joy-Cons being stronger, there being a kickstand in the back, including just being a bigger screen, is pretty nice. But is it $100 worth of nice? I really struggled with this console because it's getting very close in price to a PS5 and an Xbox Series X. And honestly, I have both of those too. I'm a gooner. Therefore, I know how powerful they are. And what I've played thus far, the Switch 2 is simply not there. But I do have to say, they were kind of lazy making this console from the initial start. It felt as if other consoles such as the 3DS or even the Wii U were more innovative. But this console, which is a new era for Nintendo, they just said this is the Switch, but it's number 2. It is pretty lazy, I will not lie. And honestly, even the Joy-Cons having a mouse functionality is not really enough for you to spend that extra $100 cash. So if you ask me about the console itself, is it really worth the $450 including inflation? No, it's simply not. But it's not always about the console itself. Sometimes it can be about the games. And even though Nintendo held this one to their chest, they said on launch, we're going to give you one game, Mario Kart World. Now look, I know I can talk about the console more, but I have to talk about the game that they released as the launch title. This is simply not enough. You see, you've heard it before. There's a couple of things wrong with Mario Kart World. And of course, the biggest stinker for you is Mario Kart World is a total of $80. Compared to other things such as, I don't know, deluxes or special editions, for a base game, this is one of the highest I've seen. There are outliers, I know. However, the issue with Nintendo is this is the new norm. And if you ask me, since I've been playing Kart World for quite some time now, is it really worth the $80? It's not. We had Kart 8 for years, and there was plenty of DLC for it. So as we continue to dream about Kart 9, which is technically this game from what we know, we thought it would be much bigger than it actually is. Don't get me wrong, Kart World has a lot of things that other Mario Karts simply didn't have. I mean, heck, I can play as Moo Moo. But is it honestly worth the big price jump to play as Moo Moo? I really struggle with seeing that this is the only game that they release as a brand new game for Nintendo Switch 2. I really thought they would have something else ready, such as the new Donkey Kong game or maybe the Kirby game, but it's simply not there. And it makes you wonder, if those games were not ready, why release the Switch 2 ahead of time? Plus, these two games themselves aren't really brand new, so what's going on? There is no Smash title here. There is nothing like Splatoon coming around, so I don't know what we're looking for. And what I'm disgustingly shocked by is there's no Mario 3D game. The truth is there's a lack of games coming to the Nintendo Switch, and especially on release. But even if you do have other games running on it, such as Street Fighter, Cyberpunk, in my personal opinion, you should play it on a different console. It's not enough anyways, because this is a Nintendo. But look, the console, the games, the content within the games, it is a little bit overpriced compared to what you're going to get. And I spent more time thinking that maybe towards the end of this calendar year, we're going to get more titles. Then I realized they're not exclusively built for the Switch 2. Games such as the Pokemon Legends game is not being built on Switch 2. This game is being built on the Switch 1, which is simply not good. Because what do you get for having this game if you're playing it on the Switch 2 compared to your Switch 1? Now, there are some games that they announced that you can pay an extra fee because they're evil like that to get more content. But it's really just DLC, and honestly, this should have been for free. Mario Party Jamboree and Kirby and Forgotten Land would get some of this content, but you gotta pay a price. But that's not my only issue with this new Nintendo era. Besides this lacking DLC, you probably know about Nintendo starting to release their old content. Most of their old consoles and games are very hard to get your hands on unless you go to something like GameStop. So because their old content is not accessible, they're starting to re-release it on the Switch 2, and now it's time for the GameCube era, which I absolutely adore. But you see, while I was trying to find some new GameCube games to play, I realized they only released 3. Since the launch of Switch 2, they released F-Zero, Soul Calibur 2, as well as a Zelda game. And let's be completely honest, 2 of those are fumbles. Look, putting out another Zelda game is a great play, even if they choose to remaster or remake it. When it comes to F-Zero, I would kind of argue this is not the best play as a starter, just because they don't still make F-Zero content. But you know what? They gave it online playability, so it's not that bad. But I have no clue what they were doing with Soul Calibur 2. It's hard when it comes to old fighting games because there are not really people still playing it, unless you're talking about something such as Melee, but that really should have been in the grave anyway. So to go back to Soul Calibur 2 just to have Link in it, I don't understand it. But overall, I don't have an issue with them specifically releasing these games compared to what you chose to release for the launch. I mean, I really expected to see Mario Sunshine and maybe Animal Crossing for the launch. I just don't think that 2 of these are the right pick to start it off. However, I let it go. I just said I can't wait to play these GameCube games and also on my GameCube controller. And lucky for us, they're giving us a brand new GameCube controller with a new button. And even luckier for them, this is an insane price. I mean, let's not cap, you know who I am, a gooner, I got one. The problem is you can only get one. I mean, let's be honest, it took them 2 berries and a twig to make this GameCube controller. But not only you have to pay a high price for it, you can only get one per Nintendo Online account. It's just awful, a terrible play if people want to spend more money on Nintendo. So now here I am getting my too expensive GameCube controller just to play Soul Calibur 2, which costs more money including the online. I saw this from another creator and I would recommend you watch her video because she talks about it much more elaborate than I do. But it feels as if Nintendo cares more about that bag compared to their legacy and relics. And that's what really frustrates a consumer, to realize that there's just these payment things everywhere and it's not really about the game. If they really cared about the game that they're releasing, they would have given us not only more Nintendo stuff, they would have probably released this in a better price. If you looked at the Nintendo Direct, besides the release of Mario Kart World, you also notice there's a lot of other games that were already out being put on Switch 2. But let's be completely honest, if you have something like an Xbox, PlayStation, Steam, and you do have access to play Street Fighter, are you choosing to play on your Nintendo over those? I'm sorry, but I could just never. My Nintendo is specifically made for me to play Nintendo stuff. If there's ever a game that's going to be on all consoles, then I'm going to choose either by the price or the quality. So what advantage do I get for playing Street Fighter on my Switch compared to my PlayStation? Now I get it, first world problems, I know, I understand. But they had a large section of currently released games just displaying them what's going to be on Switch 2. And then an itty bitty section talking about here's what we will eventually put on our Switch 2. But they said just in the meantime, here's another game you can choose to purchase that's just a guide of the console. Now where do I even begin talking about this? I'm telling you right now, this simply should have been free. I am sorry. I am shocked, and I'm just going to be honest with you, I did not purchase it. This is one thing that should have been free for the console. Because it's a simple manual of how the Switch 2 was made, I feel like this should have been a part of your original purchase. I mean, what business do I have paying for the knowledge of why my Joy-Con 2 is drifting? It just simply doesn't make sense. And of all the things I've complained about from the games and the consoles and re-releases, this one might trigger me the most. I simply can't get on board with it. And I understand some people choosing to not buy a game or not buying a console because it's too much money in inflation. And usually I would say to each their own, I can completely understand. But truth be told, if you bought this, you simply fumbled. I just don't get it. Even if you did have the change to spare, I felt like it could be useful somewhere else compared to this. But that's not completely your fault. Nintendo realized they could get that money out of you anyway. So where do we stop here? Talking about the console, talking about the games? I don't really know. But now that we have talked about both of those, I need to talk about Nintendo as a company. Now, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it in the kindest manner I possibly can. Over the past couple of years, Nintendo has simply changed their philosophy. I believe once upon a time, Nintendo used to care about what their fans wanted. I mean, this is a company that is based off of cartoon-looking games. And because they're really the only big company doing it, they realize that, hey, people are going to come to us no matter what. I remember back in the day playing so many Nintendo games that I absolutely loved. While this technically is a branch of Nintendo, whatever, Game Freak is the first one I think of. One of the best games Pokemon has ever had is Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And I believe to this day they've never been able to hit the same accomplishment, nor have they tried. I mean, the first things first, we're talking about a game that has 16 gym badges. A game that takes you to several different regions and gives you multiple different starters. This was pretty crazy as an audience member when it first happened, and I argue that it's never going to happen again. If you've been paying attention to anything going on with Pokemon, you know that they have just been fumbling the bag. They had to move to another motto of not releasing a Pokemon game every single year because it's coming out like trash. But Pokemon is one of the most obvious franchises I can think of. But that doesn't take away from other franchises too that may have had success here and there, such as the Legend of Zelda series. I mean, yeah, of course, Breath of the Wild was a very, very good game compared to the others. But this for sure is not the norm. And please don't forget, when they released Breath of the Wild, they also said you need to hike up that price. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem as if Nintendo is here to either innovate you or just to give you something that you want to love. It is sadly all about that guap, and we can tell. Most fans are simply not supportive of DLC because most of the time it's really planned. And I believe this too, content is taken out of the base game so they can later release it at a different price. And I just simply don't like this method. To me, it's very greedy. Unfortunately, Nintendo is a pro at doing this. And we're seeing it right now where they're giving us extra editions of a Switch 2 version for another price. But overall, it's very difficult to know if Nintendo even cares about their legacy and fans. Truth be told, what we used to know about Nintendo is not anymore. That time has simply passed and it sucks. You've been seeing all the crazy things about Nintendo and what they've been doing for the past couple of years. I think some of the most craziest things they've done is doing cease and desist against different companies such as Power World. And I get it, Power World is based off of Pokemon. We all know this, even they do. But the things that they've done and been trying to do against companies such as this are a little bit overboard. And just because I'm saying Power World does not mean this is the only occasion it's happened. They don't even want you playing any type of games off of an emulator if it's not accessible by them. I really struggle to understand a company like Nintendo. Even though it is your franchise, you hold it with an iron fist, and they'll do anything to make sure you don't take advantage or even use things that they don't allow. Another great example I would love to talk about, because I was a part of this community, is the Smash community. Now look, I'm not like some of them people out there, I'm not going to talk about it today. But here's an example of a party/fighting game that they could support and they just choose not to. It's difficult. We know you have the cash and we know you want to promote your own game, but they choose not to. I don't really understand why, especially when it comes to a game very successful such as Smash. Instead, when it comes to a game such as Smash Brothers, they'll do anything to try to stop promoting it. They're not giving you any money in any tournament. You're not getting in their wallet. You're also not going to be able to mod any Smash game, period, even if you cannot buy it and they don't make money from it anymore. It's not happening, not on their watch. Matter of fact, Big Daddy Nintendo dislikes you so much, you're not even going to play in these tournaments. They're just going to shut them down, period. As I'm writing this video, these are just occasions off of the top of my head, and I'm sure I can give you plenty more. And the saddest part of this is I simply don't understand why. Nintendo acts as if they are anti-fun almost, and I don't really get it. I understand that their target is for kids, but you gotta understand that not every child is gonna have their own money. So if you have a chance at which an audience such as adults can buy your content left and right, why not exploit them? I mean, let's be completely honest, there's another IP that's really struggling with this well, and that's Disney. Both of these companies I kind of put together in the same group. Both of them want to have a specific target audience, however, they won't acknowledge any other audience that will give them the money they want. Disney is unfortunately doing an awful job at this as well. They refuse to go ahead and give the older generation what they want. I do agree it's kind of weird to see adults running into a Disney World and they don't have kids, but unfortunately for you, that is simply your demographic, and you need to embrace that the best way you can. Don't get me wrong, kids want to be a part of Nintendo and Disney. They really do, however, they're at the discretion of their parents. And how many people have you seen at which their parents never let them watch this or play this sometime within their childhood? Disney, Nintendo, you both need to grow up. It's a crazy sentence to say, I understand, but the times that you were once in are not there anymore. But knocking off Disney because I can tear you up another day, Nintendo, you're in the wrong for this. Children are not going to be competing in your Smash Brothers game. It's not going to happen. You have adults, grown men that are constantly playing and buying your content. So what they need to do is start supporting and using that demographic. I'm kind of sick of seeing all these crazy stories about Nintendo choosing to shut down a YouTube channel because they don't want their content online. Or seeing things Nintendo software is still behind bars and they refuse to try to innovate anything or even reach their competitors. It just kind of sucks, and sometimes you have to realize that the Nintendo you once knew is not the same one that you know today. As I mentioned before, and I'm going to kind of put my part here, I used to love Nintendo. I mean, as a child within that demographic years ago, Nintendo could never do wrong. But unfortunately, things have changed, and I believe this is a new era that we have to open our eyes to. Besides the Steam Deck, I would say you really have three main parties with Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. And as much as I love to crash out on Trashbox, it is for sure not the final spot on this list. Nintendo, you are simply the worst franchise. And when it comes to you currently releasing the Switch 2, you're not doing any better. I can continuously find something to harp on time and time again with Nintendo, which I simply can't do with Sony or Xbox. Don't get me wrong, they do make mistakes, I promise you that. But again, it just simply doesn't hit the same, such as a company like this. Moving forward within the Switch 2's life, we will probably talk about this console yet again. I mean, we have like no games to play on it, so I'm sure there's gonna be more controversy. And whenever I do make a follow-up video, I do want to revisit this again. I'd argue that Nintendo, even though the prices may say differently, are at an all-time low. And fans are simply at a standstill when it comes to this franchise. So I really hope maybe 6 months, a year, 5 years, we'll see this franchise rise again. But the thing is, until I can play Pokemon Coliseum and show my girlfriend Pokemon for the first time, I don't care. Overall, I simply want to see them do better. Now, some of you will agree or disagree, and that's perfectly fine. So let me know what you think of the Switch 2, Nintendo, and all of that in the comments down below. I shouldn't have to say this, but be civil, please. I don't want to see bloodshed in the comments. And if you want to see any more game or Nintendo content, show some love to this video, and we'll see what happens next. Until then, go check out this playlist over here. Y'all have a good one. Take care.